Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're going to continue on with the show this morning. Our next presenters are Ann and Jason Andrews. They are mother and son. Gosh, where do we start? I guess we start last year. Last year, this sweet lady, Ann Andrews, came up to me at the conference and said, "By the way, Bob, we've just published this little book in UK, Abducted. I'd like to give you a copy. You might find it interesting." Talked with them a little bit and took the book and did not get around to reading it for probably a couple of months after I got home, but I eventually try to read everything people give me. I was blown away. I was laid out flat. This is, guys, trust me, believe me, this is at least among the top 5 and probably one of the top 3 UFO abduction books ever written. This book chronicles the Andrews family's intimate involvement with the phenomena from the time Jason was about 4 years old. And although the book chronicles the family's involvement, it kind of eventually became to be understood by everyone that the key player in this whole family scenario was Jason. Because Jason, from 4 years old through the present, had almost continuous nightly schooling. What, 16 years, 17 years now? Every night, a couple of nights a week. Being prepared for what's coming, for his part, for our part, because we have a part. The result was the brand new book. It's just off the press, Jason, My Indigo Child. And indeed, Jason is an indigo child. He's one of this cadre, and he is now going to be coming forward personally to begin to tell us what the hell is going on. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann and Jason.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm very proud and very honoured to be here, and I'd like to thank Bob and Terry and their committee for inviting me, and Jason. I would like to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I've been happily married to Paul for 28 years, and we both grew up in South London. We have 2 grown-up sons, Daniel, who is 25, and Jason, who is here with me today, is 21. My upbringing was very ordinary, and that is how I would describe myself and my family. Very ordinary, although we've had to cope with some very extraordinary situations over the years. And these all started when Jason was born. It's taken us more than 12 years to understand and accept that Jason has an important role to play in the alien agenda. This wasn't something that we readily accepted, and in the beginning, we looked for answers elsewhere for what was happening to him and to our family. We took our son to see psychiatrists, psychologists, child behaviourists, and many doctors, believing that there had to be a rational explanation for everything. Jason's been tested for sleep epilepsy, brain malfunctions, you name it, he's had it. But all tests proved negative, which left us with no answers. At that time, we put a lot of faith in the medical profession because we were confident that someone would come up with the condition and the cure. All we ever got was confirmation that there is nothing wrong with him, either physically or mentally. We still have the letters from the psychiatrist stating that he is not psychotic. Therefore, his account of what happens to him, and this hasn't altered since he was about 4 years old, is the truth. We were then grudgingly forced to accept the truth of our still ongoing situation. My greatest regret, and if I'm honest, my guilt in all of this, is the fact that it took me more than 12 years to finally accept what was happening to our son. We were always there for him in the sense that most parents are there for their children, to hold him and cuddle him when he would run screaming to us about his nightmares. But we couldn't accept what he was telling us. Our social upbringing would not allow us to believe that such things, even though we had no other explanation. Today, if you ask Jason if he has one memory which stands out in all of this, he will always answer, the day my mum and dad said that they believed me. So what I would like to do is to briefly talk about events from our past and bring you up to date on our situation. Then I would like to hand over to my son, who can explain better than I can exactly how he felt growing up, and then perhaps, and more importantly, how all this has moulded him into the person he is today. And I'll add that he is one that I'm very proud of. Now, Jason was born in Sidcup, in the county of Kent in England. Now, although I'd experienced a lot of health problems with this pregnancy, things got a lot worse at the birth. Now, when a heart monitor was suddenly not detecting any heartbeat from the baby, you can imagine the panic that ensued. However, when Jason was born perfectly healthy, the staff were all, quite surprised and very happy. And this machine was thought to be faulty and was taken away for repair. Now, I only mention here the difficulty with Jason's birth, as it will have some bearing later on, so please just bear with me on this. Now, when Jason was a few weeks old, we moved him to a cot in his own room, and this is when strange things first began to happen. We would hear him crying and go in his room, but would find that he'd been moved from his cot. He was always close. Sometimes he was under a chair, sometimes he was under the cot itself, and a few times we found him crying behind the door. Now, we looked for reasons for this, and we assumed that maybe his brother Daniel, who was 4 at the time, was the culprit. And we figured that maybe, just maybe, if he stood on a chair, then he might possibly be able to reach the baby. Daniel denied it. And there were even times when Daniel wasn't even home when this would happen. But we were at a loss to explain it. But then it all seemed to stop after a few weeks, so we forgot about it. We didn't dwell on it. Over the next few years, Daniel, our oldest son, had an invisible friend he would talk to. And this began about the time Jason was born. Now, we accepted this as being quite normal for a small child, but we found that his description of this friend was rather odd. He said that his friend was called Eunice, and that he was taller than Daddy, and he wore a shiny all-in-one suit. And Daniel said that Eunice was his special soldier man, and he came from the stars, and he was there to teach Daniel about the stars and the planets. And to be honest, for a 4-year-old, Daniel had an amazing knowledge of astronomy. He would stand out in the garden and say, "You see that star, Mum? This is this, that is that." And truthfully, again, we just assume, well, perhaps it's something he's watched on the television, or, again, we rationalised everything. But we would walk past his room, we'd hear him laughing. But if we entered the room, he'd just give us a bewildering look and say, "Oh, thanks, Mum. You frightened him away again." Now, this friend stayed with Daniel until he was 7. And then Daniel said that he never saw him ever again. Now, when Jason was 4, we organised his first real birthday party. And when all the children had left, there was Paul, my mum, and myself. We sat down for a well-earned cup of tea after all the clearing up. Excuse me. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and a storm was gathering outside. Now, this would have been July, so it was quite warm. Now, Jason was asleep on the couch, and Daniel was in bed. Then there was a loud knock at the door. Now, at that time, we lived in a farm cottage, and the little lane to the farm cottage ended at our house. So, in other words, whoever was knocking at the door had come there, to see us. Paul answered it, but there was no one there. However, as he closed the door, there was a loud crack of thunder which woke Daniel, and he came running down the stairs. Then suddenly there was a flash of lightning, and it was so fierce that it filled the room. And it was at this point that Jason, who'd been asleep, sat bolt upright and started to spout incredible numbers. He was just coming out with long lists of numbers extremely quickly, almost computer fashion. I mean, this is a 4-year-old who can just about count to 10. At the same moment, the loud knocking began again, but this time it was coming from the windows, all the downstairs windows, and the back of the house, and then all the upstairs windows and the back windows. The knocking just grew louder and louder. It was so intense. My mum was terrified. We were all terrified. My mum was crying. Daniel was crying. Paul tried to phone the police. He grabbed the phone, but the phone was dead. Then suddenly, Jason stopped talking. And as he did, the knocking began to stop. We were all stunned by the silence when Jason slid off the couch and walked to the front door. Paul gently put his hand on his shoulder and he said, "Where are you going, boy? It's pouring down." And Jason, without even blinking, just answered, "I have to go. They're waiting for me." Paul picked him up and the knocking began again from all over the house. And in desperation, Paul was like gently shaking Jason and saying, "For God's sake, boy, wake up, wake up." Then Jason started to blink, very slowly at first, but then the more he started to blink and as if he was coming round, the more the knocking died down until he was wide awake. And when he was wide awake, the noise stopped completely. And he just looked at his dad, gave him a big wet kiss and said, "Oh, can I watch telly?" Now, Jason seemed perfectly fine. He had no memory of what had just happened. Paul tried the phone again, and this time it was working perfectly. He rang the police, and eventually 2 officers turned up. Paul went outside with them with a flashlight, and then they came back to the door. And they could find nothing. No footprints in the mud. I mean, there would have been so much mud. And then one of the officers said, "With all this rain, you'd think there would be footprints." We did briefly discuss the night's events, but Paul still believed it must have been vandals and that, okay, Jason was just dreaming. He also made it clear that it was not open for further discussion. However, after that night, things changed. We started to experience a lot of paranormal stuff, such as electrical appliances with a mind of their own. Even after we'd removed the plug. You know, the TV would come on in the middle of the night extremely loudly. The kettle would boil dry. The stove would switch itself on. We thought the wiring was faulty, but the electrician we called could find nothing. Then things started disappearing and reappearing in odd places. Keys and toothbrushes would turn up in cupboards. Then furniture would be moved around in the night. Clocks would gain or lose time. And then suddenly we started getting bright lights, which would invade the house in the middle of the night. And they were so bright that they would actually wake us up. But before we could investigate what was going on, they would go out. Now, again, you know, I say that we look for rational explanations because the way we were brought up, these sort of strange things just would not be allowed to happen. But we put all this down to the house being haunted. I mean, that was okay. I mean, the house itself was nearly 200 years old, so we figured, well, why shouldn't it have its share of spirits from the past? And I remember, too, that when I was growing up in London, we had similar things happening, and my dad claimed that it was a ghost, and he even named him Charlie in an effort to make light of the situation. So it seemed right then that we should call our ghost Charlie. And Daniel thought it was great having our own ghosts, but Jason was always terrified. Then just after the birthday party, Jason began having bad dreams again about little people who would appear in his room and take him away in the night. He said that they would take him to a hospital place where they would hurt him and he couldn't move. These dreams were so real to him that eventually he came to sleep in our room. He would hold on to my hand at night, you know, absolutely terrified, and he would just cling to my fingers over the side of the bed until he fell asleep. He was that frightened. He changed from an outgoing, lively boy, as you see here with his brother, to a clingy child who was terrified of being alone. Right. Okay, now when Jason was 5, we moved to a small holding in Kent. This is one of the best pictures I could find, just to show you the layout of the place. Now, we hoped that a new start might help with Jason's nightmares. However, they continued. Now, our main business on the farm was raising calves, and we had a new batch of 26, varying in age. Now, I should point out here that if you see the tree line beyond the fields there, about half a mile the other side of this thick woodland, it's still woodland, but there is a military base there called Merryworth. And as I say, our main business was raising calves, and we had a new batch arrive, 26 in total, varying in ages. I mean, the idea was that farmers, big farms, didn't have enough time or resources to look after babies. So we used to do the work for them because they had to be fed about 4 or 5 times a day, and really looked after. And then when they were about 6 months old, we would sell them on to the bigger farms. Now, one of the calves died, although it had been healthy the day before. I mean, okay, this happens. It's a fact of life. We called the vet because we couldn't understand it. It hadn't been sick or anything. But she didn't know what had killed it. And she was so puzzled that she sent the body to the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, by the time the ministry inspected the farm and discovered that this was a rare form of salmonella, or so they said, we had lost another 23 perfectly healthy animals. Although this report exonerated us, it didn't help us. We were told at first to burn the bodies to stop the risk of infection, but then we got a call from a ministry official to say, keep the bodies and they will be collected. A van turned up one morning with 6 men in coveralls, complete with hoods and face masks, and they wandered around the property with some sort of Geiger counters. And every time one of us tried to go over to them, they would just, shush us away, with their hand. Then one of them got onto a walkie-talkie, and then a lorry appeared. Then the bodies of the animals were carefully wrapped in plastic sheets and loaded into the lorry. The small convoy then left without a word, and we never heard any more from anyone. Now, after exactly a month, whatever this was, it hit us again, and we lost all of our remaining livestock. We had nothing. The horses were safe as they grazed one of the farther fields, as you can see from the picture here. Now, the following day, after we lost our last animal, a council official turned up. Now, how he'd got to know about this, we haven't a clue. And he said to us, well, as you have no living now, you can't earn your own living, you forfeit the right to live on your property. We were moved within days to a council house in the village and were told that it was just, it would just be a few days and that we should reapply for residential permission and put in another plan for raising livestock. We were told, as I say, it would be at the most a matter of a couple of months, and we believed them. We spent the next 9 years trying to live back on our own property. However, it was 5 years after this incident with the animals that we spoke to an officer from the same ministry that had collected the bodies. We were at that time trying again to get permission to live there, and we thought, well, if we get his advice, then perhaps we might have cracked it at last. We might get permission. Now, he met us at the farm, and he looked around, and he said, why on earth did you ever leave here? And we said to him, well, we had this thing, and we got this report out and showed him that we had. And he looked really puzzled. And he said that at that time, he would have been the officer in charge of notifiable diseases, yet he'd not heard about this. And he found it unbelievable. I gave him a copy of our report. And he said, well, leave it with me. I'm going to find out about this. This is really strange. Now, we heard nothing from him for weeks. So I phoned the ministry. And I was told that this officer had been transferred very quickly to Wales. I rang the Welsh office, but they said they'd never heard of him. We did hear back from the ministry. I'll just get this out and show you. This is the report. I don't know if it's very clear. but you're welcome to look at it afterwards. This is the report that we received from the ministry. Now, over the next few days, we did hear from the ministry. And they said, yes, this is very strange. You're trying to find out about this case of, this salmonella outbreak. And we will look into it for you. And I said to them, okay, I'll send you a copy of the report. And they said, oh, no, we want the original. They said, we can't do anything unless we've got the original. And at first they were very polite about it. But in all, they phoned about 3 or 4 times. And towards the last call, they got very demanding. And they said, you've no right to have it, we want it. And I said, no. And as I said, that's the report that I've just shown you here. Now, although we couldn't live on the farm, we still went there every day to care for the few horses that we had. And we decided that we would try older cattle. And we bought some cattle which were guaranteed in calf. Now, we also became aware at that time that the farm was being watched. Several times we would go along the track to the farm and we would see people just standing out in the middle of a barley field. It seemed obvious that they wanted us to know they were watching. Now, several times when we were working on fence lines, along by the trees there, we would hear a phone ringing in the undergrowth. Again, somebody saying, look, we're here, we're watching you, we're not going to approach you, but we want you to know we're here. Now, Jason's nightmares had begun again, but then he was found missing during the night, even though the house was locked from the inside. We once found him asleep on a kitchen worktop and once in a locked shed at the end of the garden. He was also having terrible stomach pains and was rushed into hospital on 3 occasions, but no cause was ever found for the pains, which very quickly subsided. His behaviour at school had changed, and it got to the point where he was threatened with expulsion unless we agreed to take him to a psychiatrist. He was seeing a psychiatrist on a regular basis when, just by chance one night, we saw a programme on TV about hypnosis. And about how it was being used to recover forgotten memories, to help people with phobias. And there was a man who'd seen a bright light whilst driving, and it transpired that this man had missing time and he'd been abducted by aliens. Jason was so upset by this, and he'd gone up to his feet and he threw something at the TV, which fortunately missed, but exploded on hitting the wall. And of course, Paul jumped up and he said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" And Jason was crying, and he turned around and he said, "That guy on TV shouldn't want to know what happened, because I know what happens, I remember everything, and I don't want to remember." Now with that, he ran out into the kitchen, and we just sat there and looked at each other. We had no idea what to make of this. We just couldn't believe it, And then Daniel was sitting there, and now 16, he said to us, "Don't you get it?" And we looked at him, we said, "Get what?" And he said, "This guy has been abducted by aliens." He said, "Jason's been taken for years." And of course, Paul looked at him and he said, "Don't be so ridiculous." And Daniel just went, "See, that's why I've not said anything." He said, "I knew what your reaction would be." He said, "And besides," he said, "I thought that Jason's shrink would have got it out of him by now." And I spoke to Daniel about this, and I said, what happens? And Daniel explained to me, he said, "Mum," he said, "do you remember my soldier man I had when I was little?" He said, "Eunice?" And I said, "Yes, I remember you had an invisible friend." And he said, "Well, he wasn't invisible," he said, "but," he said, "he told me that they had to stop visiting me," he said, "because they'd made a mistake and they'd realised that they were working with the wrong one." He said they realised that they should be working with Jason because Jason is the one with the original soul. After that revelation, we decided that we should look into this subject. It wasn't then that we believed it. We still couldn't believe it, but we believed that Jason believed it, and that was important. So we figured that, the more information we had, then the better it would be, the better sort of armed, if you like, we would be to help him. Now, we managed to find a few books on the subject, and were amazed by some of the similarities that to Jason's account. His story had never altered since he was first able to speak. Now, in a roundabout way, which I haven't got time to go into, we were put in touch with Tony Dodd. Some of you may have heard of him. Now, at that time, he was a director of investigations for the UFO magazine in England. He was very well respected, and he'd been a police officer for many, many years. Now, we now refer to Tony, even now, as our lifeline, because I don't know where we would have been without him. Now, it was about this time also that the psychiatrist noticed marks on Jason, and one morning he got up for an appointment with her, and he had a triangle, a perfect 2-inch triangle on his side, and it was like a raised triangle. I'll see if I think I've got a picture of it. Oh, no, that's Jason at 12, but I put that in because if you look at his face, I think you can tell just what an unhappy child he is. Okay, this is, I don't know if that'll come up. It's missed it. Basically, this is a letter that I put in which the psychiatrist actually wrote to our GP, and in the letter, I'm sorry, I don't know how to make that come up at all to show you. But if I just explain, in the letter, she talks about this triangle. And she says, it's a perfect 2-inch triangle. I mean, all she did when she saw it, she called in all her colleagues, and they're all standing around him, sort of prodding and probing, and nobody knew what to make of it. And she was so, infatuated with this that she wrote to the GP and she said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I don't know what to make of it. Now, we were now getting help from Tony Dodd, and the psychiatrist stated that she could do nothing for him. Oh, so it's this one?
That's the rest of the letter.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you can see that. It's about the 5th one down. It says the patch on his tummy was triangular, approximately 2 sides, and slightly brownish, but having no raised component or edge. It was apparently red on the morning he came to see me. Now, as I say, she said that she could do nothing for him, but she put in another letter. There it is. If you look at number 2, she says, we talked as to how to live with his experiences. These do not appear to be psychotic. Now, that in itself was great, for us. In other words, what he says happens to him is the truth. Now, we were forced to grudgingly accept that we were involved in a situation which we had no control over whatsoever. It was something that we couldn't change. But then something else changed. Jason had been out riding his horse, Patch, when another horse, having already thrown its rider, attacked Patch, bringing both horse and rider crashing to the floor. Excuse me. Now, Patch rolled over Jason, and Jason was thought to be badly hurt. However, he immediately got to his feet and went to his horse and was checking him all over to make sure that he was okay. Jason felt fine. Now, I heard about this when I went to the stables to pick him up. And I should mention here that, this was just after the time that we started believing what our son was telling us. And, we were there for him in every sense. And whilst driving home, I kept saying to him, look, do you think we should go to the outpatients? Do you think you should be checked out? It was such a bad fall that, you must have hurt something. And he just laughed and he said, no, I'm not hurt. He said, they didn't like it. And I immediately stopped the car and I said, what are you talking about? And he said, they absorbed all the pain. He said, I didn't feel a thing. He said, they did. He said, they didn't like it. And then he went on to explain to me that for a while now, he'd been allowing them to experience things through him. He said that they could only do it if he gave permission. But he said that they loved the thrill of the gallop or they loved a bike ride. And he said that perhaps the other horse that attacked his that day had sensed the ET presence, didn't like it one bit, which is the reason why it attacked him. But then he laughed again and he said, they really don't like feeling pain. Now, as I said, Jason was getting better. He was starting to listen to them, to listen to what they were saying to him. And it was also suggested at this time, Tony Dodd suggested to us that perhaps we should tell our close family what was happening with Jason, because he thought that their support would be of great help. Now, my mother believed us, finally admitting that strange things had often happened to my dad. However, it wasn't long before she discovered firsthand just what we were going through. Now, Mum and I had rented a caravan on the coast for a week, and we took the boys and we took my two nieces, Kaylee and Sarah. And it was to be Jason's 13th birthday when we were on holiday. Paul couldn't come with us because of work commitments. But I got up early on the morning of Jason's birthday and went to get some pills for a headache. And then I heard my mum sort of very nervously say, "Who's out there?" I said, "It's only me, Mum." And she opened the door. And I looked at her, and she had a white nightgown on, and it was covered in blood. Now, I quickly sat her down, and I said, "My God, what's happened?" And she was crying, and she said to me, during the night, she said, I woke up, because my mum has fairly long hair, and she scoops it to the back of her head and puts like a fancy slide in it. And she said, I was woken up because my hair, I forgot to take this slide out, and it was digging in the back of my head. She said, I put my arm up to take it out. She said, and as I reached for the bedside table to put it down, she said, I suddenly found I was unable to move. She said, I thought I was having a stroke. She said, then she could see a bright light coming under the door, and she could hear a lot of shuffling noises. She said, then suddenly the light went out, and she again was able to move. But she suffered such a horrendous nosebleed. She said, I didn't think it was ever going to stop. Now, I persuaded her that it was safe to sleep now as it was daylight, because she was so distraught about all this, and she agreed. Now, when the kids got up, I said to them, look, you've got to be quiet because Nanny needs some sleep. And Sarah, my niece, who was about 10 at the time, she said, Nanny's not the only one who needs sleep. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I was sleeping. She said, and then she said, suddenly I was woken up. She said, and there were hundreds and hundreds of motorbikes. She said, and they were just driving round and round and round the caravan. She said, all you could see were all these lights. She said, and the noise. She said, I was coming to tell you, she said, but she said, I think I fell asleep. Now, when Jason got up, a little while later, he was distraught. And he was so upset because he said that they'd come for him on his birthday. He started to cry and said he had a pain in his side. And when I looked, he had a swelling on his side the size of a tennis ball. I wanted to rush to the doctors, but as usual, by late afternoon, it was nearly gone. Then my other niece, Kaylee, came running in, and she said, come on, you've got to come outside and see these great big helicopter planes. And we went outside, and we looked, and about 100 feet above the campsite, there were 8 Chinook helicopters, all just sort of hovering above. And then we spotted a small helicopter, all black, and they circled the complete campsite for about 10 minutes. And then after that, they just all headed out to sea. Now, coming back to our situation with the farm, as I said, we've lost a lot of animals. We've found wild animals in our fields with perfect holes in their foreheads, but with no blood anywhere. We even had one of our farm cats was laid out on a top of a straw bale with just one single hole in her forehead. There was also an incident when Paul lost his favourite mare. She was perfectly fine the day before, yet dead the next morning. Now, we had an autopsy done on her because we needed to know what had happened. And the vet said, well, I can't give you a proper report because, he said, I don't know what's happened to her. He said, it looks like her stomach has exploded and there's hardly any blood. Now, I should mention that, that Jason had woken the previous night and he was screaming, Honey's dead, Honey's dead. And we went into him and we thought, oh my God, is this another experience? And he clung to me and he said, Mum, Honey's dead. He said, but they didn't know she was ours. They didn't know. And the thing was, obviously he was correct, but this mare was actually grazing on a neighbour's field. Now, she left a 2-week-old foal. We had heavily pregnant cows on the farm, and they were suddenly barren. We were expecting them to calve any time, and they were all confirmed to be in calf by the vet, and we were extremely worried. We called the vet, and he came up, and he was as mystified as us, and he said, well, where are they? He said, and then he checked all the animals out, and he came back to us, and again, he was absolutely stunned, and he said, half of them are in calf. And I said, oh, so they're still in calf? And he said, well, no. He said, they're only recently in calf. He said, they're only a couple of months. And as I said, he was stunned. We were stunned. I mean, this was a neat trick, as there wasn't a bull for miles. So how this happened, we'll never know. We decided then that whatever was happening, we couldn't fight it. We sold the cattle, and we finally admitted defeat with the farm in 1998. We tried for so many years to get back there. Now, we had no choice. We engaged a land agent just prior to that who had the reputation of getting permission, for people to live on pieces of land. And he had a good reputation for getting results. And he had many contacts, and for the right price, he would use these contacts. And he came up to the farm, and he looked around and he said, I'll have you up here by Christmas. And we were elated. We thought, oh, that's fantastic, Anyway, we didn't hear from him for a while, so we went to his office, and at first he refused to see us. And then he did agree to see us, and he sat there and he said, look, he said, I can't do anything for you. And we said, why? And he said, I've spoken to my contacts. He said, and I've been advised that your situation is nothing whatsoever to do with the local council. He said, because their strings are being pulled by some very big guns. It was also stressed to us from him that we were to be stopped from ever living on our property again. And he did stress we were to be stopped at all costs. Now, we took this threat seriously, as we had children to consider. We eventually sold the farm to a woman who said that she wanted to keep horses there, but we never met her. It was all done through a solicitor. But to date, there is nothing there. All the buildings have been removed, the pond has been filled in, and a strong perimeter fence has been erected all the way around the property, and there are no animals there. We decided we needed to get right away. We thought we could escape this situation, and we moved right away to South Lincolnshire, but the interference didn't stop. We found we were being watched, and even our phone was being monitored. Now, it got to the point even where our friends were being threatened. Now, we had a lovely young friend from Australia was staying with us. She was actually staying in London with her cousin, but she'd come over to spend a few days with us. And after she returned back to her cousin's house, immediately she got in the door, the phone rang, and she answered it, and it was a man, and he said to her, he said to her her name, and he said that he knew where she'd been. He gave all of our names, our address. He told her where we went, what we all did, etc. And then he said to her, it would be in your best interest if you were to have nothing more to do with these people. And I would also stress here that this young friend of ours was also an experiencer. Now, a few days after that, 2 telephone vans turned up, and they had 2 men in each. Now, one of these men gets out of the van, and he comes over and he says to me that they're here to do some work as our telephone is out of order. I said to him, no, it isn't. And he said, oh, well, it's to do with the wiring underneath. And I was a bit suspicious because I was at the house on my own anyway, and I said to him, okay, well, let me see a work order. And he went back to the other men, and they got back in their vehicles and they drove off. Now, I rang the telephone company and I said, what on earth is going on? But they said to me, we haven't authorized anything. They said, we can't send out 1 van. He said, let alone 2. Now, a few weeks after that, the phone was really out of order because my mum had reported it. and a van turned up. He showed me his work order. And whilst he was fixing it, he came in and he said to me, he'd written down a number on a piece of paper, and he said to me, "Do you know this number?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well," he said, "it's on your line." And I said, "No, that's not our number." And he said, "No," he said, "Your number's there as well." He said, "But," "this line has been spliced into yours." And I said, "I don't know anything about it." And he was very concerned. He called his supervisor. And in time, the supervisor turned up, and they actually traced this line to a dilapidated house out on the marshes. And the house was all but falling down, except that when they went inside, there was brand new telephone equipment. Now, throughout all this, the paranormal stuff was beginning again. I'll see if I've got a picture of... it's Jason again. Sorry, I'm not keeping up with the pictures. I do apologise. Now, that is Jason at 18 with his horse. Now, that, just to show you, this is where we now live. This is our house in Lincolnshire. As you can see, it's very secluded. Too much. Okay, as I say, paranormal stuff was beginning again. Footsteps were heard running up and down the stairs. The beds sounded as if they were being used for trampolines. And Jason's abductions were continuing, although now he had more of an understanding of what was going on. He wasn't afraid anymore. In fact, he welcomed them. And he was learning. Now, in his bedroom, we noticed that there was a strange and very heavy atmosphere in there. And he explained to me that he must learn to sleep with this atmosphere. And he explained that it is their energy. And now he cannot sleep anywhere without this energy around him. He said that it's there to keep him safe when he's asleep. Even here in this hotel, I've been in his room, and this atmosphere is with us, or with him, I should say. Now, he's becoming so much more relaxed with his experiences, and he even starts to look forward to them. We were getting to be more accepting of the situation until one morning in July 1999. This is when I began to receive letters from people overseas who began by telling me that they are experiencers. Then the writers asked me to thank Jason for being there with them when they were taken. I start to read on, and it was just utter disbelief, and I discovered that the theme running through all of these letters was that these people have always been terrified of their experiences, but the last time it happened was different because Jason was there with them. Apparently he was calm, he was peaceful, and he would persuade these people to go with him and to go with them, the aliens. Now, these people were so grateful to Jason for helping them overcome their fears, and he's with them in such a real state that he sits and chats with them just the same as we would chat with each other. And he discusses things with them like, where are they from, the weather, where we now live. He even is giving out our address, saying, well, keep in touch with me, hence the letters. And he tells these people about his feelings, his experiences, and how he's come to trust in them. Now, these letters kept coming, and they were coming from all over the world. And I've kept many of them. And just to give you an idea of the sort of things people were writing to me about, I'd like to quote from a couple of them. This one is from a gentleman in Sydney, Australia, and I quote, "Then suddenly there he was. Jason was with the aliens. And I was not frightened at all. Rather, I was exhilarated and filled with a special feeling of really strong sharing that is difficult to describe in words. But I got the very clear feeling of invitation from the aliens and from Jason himself." And this is another one from a lady in Pretoria. And she says, "Something then happened which caught me completely unaware. I became aware of a very strong feeling in my mind. It was a little like someone had come into the room, not an unwelcome person at all, just someone there, but it did not alarm me, it just surprised me. I had the feeling that I was being watched, but this didn't bother me either. The feeling grew to being watched, not from the outside, but from the inside. It was of another consciousness within my own mind. It was very gentle and very soothing, pacifying would describe it. At first I saw nothing, but I sensed something, very strongly. What I sensed was someone sending very calm, very soothing feelings, very beautiful, peaceful feelings. Then I felt his presence strongly. It was Jason who was contacting me. I experienced the calming, the care, and then I saw something which made me realize that this could not be imagination. I saw them, the aliens. It was most significantly the first time that I have ever seen them without an initial feeling of absolute terror. I could see them clearly, and I knew that it was Jason who was communicating with me. I knew that it was. I just felt his presence very strongly and send in those very calm thoughts and feelings, and then I saw him. It was very beautiful, and this experience has made a very deep impression on me. Now, okay, I could read these letters, I read the words, but I couldn't cope with this. I couldn't take all this in. This was something beyond what I could accept. Now, I couldn't sleep for days worrying about this. The letters kept coming, and I was just getting more and more anxious. However, this was all about to change just a few weeks later. Paul was working away, and I was woken from a restless sleep by a noise downstairs. Now, I went down to the living room, believing that one of the cats had been left in there accidentally. Now, as I went in and reached for the light, there in the center of the room was Hannah. Now, this was Jason's dog, who had died a few years ago. I didn't question it. I was just overwhelmed with joy to see her, and rather than questioning anything, I just rushed over to her and started fussing her, and I was crying because I was just overjoyed to see her. And she was, I assure you, she was real. Now, as I was fussing her, her huge tail was wagging so much that she knocked over some half-filled coffee cups. And as I looked round to see what the noise was, I looked back and she was gone. I looked round for her, and that's when I noticed someone standing in the corner. Now, the light was dim, so I couldn't see his face, but I could see that he was wearing some sort of dark flowing garment. He then spoke to me, and he said in my head, "Get a pen and write this down." I reached for the pen by the phone, and this, in its entirety, is what he told me that night to write down, which I'd like to share with you. All things are possible beyond the limits of your earthbound consciousness. Open your heart and your mind to see the truth of what I am telling you. If you seek the truth, you must have faith, belief in the universe. Learn to look beyond what your eyes can see and draw upon the ancient knowledge of your own inner being, your soul self, for only then will the truth emerge. Embrace it lovingly, for it is a destiny retrieved from time, your time. Now, when I woke in the morning, I didn't remember any of this until I saw the spilled cups, and then I started remembering, and I looked at the notebook. Even now, the words given to me that night bring me some comfort, and they also gave me the courage to talk to Jason about the letters. And when he came home that night, I handed him these letters, and he looked through them and read a little bit from each of them, and he just gave them back and grinned and said, "Oh, cool." And I said, "Never mind, cool. You know, what are you doing? How can you turn traitor, if you like? You know, how can you now go and help these people to be abducted? You know, you're on their side." And he looked at me and he said, "Mum," he said, "throughout all of this that was happening to me," he said, "all those years of the fear I had," he said, "although you didn't believe me," he said, "you were there for me." He said, "I have my family." He said, "but some of these people have no one." He says some of them are so near to suicide even. He said, because they have such a terror. He said, just by being with the aliens was a comfort to these people. He said, and I could sit there and I could chat to them and I could say, "Hey, look, you know, it's not that bad. You know, just calm down." In short, he was there to put them at their ease, and they were now able to accept and learn from their experiences. Now, things continued to happen at the house, and one morning I received a telephone call from a Mrs. Bradshaw who lived at the top of our lane. Now, she explained to me that during the night they'd had a visitor in their garage. When her husband went down to investigate, he found a very well-dressed man in his 30s sorting through some of their boxes. Now, when Mr. Bradshaw asked why he was there and what he was doing, the man simply smiled at him and said, "Can I see Anne Andrews, please?" And Mr. Bradshaw said, "I don't know who you're talking about." So the man just smiled at him and continued rummaging through the boxes. His wife then came in, and Mr. Bradshaw said to her, "Right, go phone the police." And she came back and rejoined her husband. She said the police are on their way. But the man didn't stop. He didn't even look up. He just continued going through the boxes. And then just before the police siren could be heard, she said to me, the man walked towards the door. She said, my husband got in his way, stood in his way, tried to block him. She said, but the man just smiled at him, she said, and just gently pushed his way past him. And she said, we both felt so afraid of him. She said, I don't know what it was about him, she said, but she said, we were both terrified of him. Now, they rushed outside, they followed him, and they were stunned when, instead of getting into a car, this man walked off into the field. Now, the police arrived about that time, and the Bradshaw said, well, they'd asked for this person, this Anne Andrews, but we don't know who that is. And the police said, okay, you know, they took down some details. They said, well, we'll try and look into this. Now, Mrs. Bradshaw said to me that she got my number and name from the telephone directory that morning, so why didn't this man do the same thing? Now, I didn't hear from the police for a couple of days, and I rang them, and I went on about this incident, and I was told, don't worry, it's been sorted. I told Mrs. Bradshaw. She also rang the police because she'd not heard anything, and she was told the same thing. And neither of us have ever heard anything more from them. Now, it was a few days after this where Paul and I returned from an unscheduled shopping trip to find that our back door was wide open. We expected to find that the house had been ransacked, but nothing was touched, except for the computer, which was on and had been wiped clean. Now, I had various letters and information from other abductees, and they were all missing. We reported the break-in, and when a police officer arrived later, he told us that the break-in was not the work of youngsters or vandals, but was a very professional job. I personally believe that this break-in was connected to the Bradshaw's uninvited guests. Now, just to give you an idea, again, of what was happening with Jason, he had a best friend at school, Alan, and one night he said to me, can Alan stay? And I said yes. But of course they slept in the living room because of the atmosphere in Jason's bedroom. Now, when I went in the living room in the morning, Alan was gone. And I said to Jason, what happened? And he said to me, well, he said, I had an experience during the night. He said, and unfortunately, when the Greys were returning me, he said, Alan was awake, he said, and he was watching. He couldn't move, but he could see. He said, and then he said, the Greys just walked me through the glass doors. He said, but then he said, one of them actually glided through the bottom of Alan's leg. Which you can only imagine what that could do to somebody. Now, Alan was actually off school for over a week, but unfortunately, when he returned to school, he had nothing but hatred for his former best friend. Even though Jason tried to talk to him about what had happened, he wanted nothing whatsoever to do with him. And then gradually, Alan started talking to other kids in the class, and whenever Jason was, came in the room, he would be met with calls of space boy, weirdo, E.T., the usual sort of, kid thing. Now, Jason took this for quite a while, and then one day he'd had enough. And he suddenly turned on them, and he said, okay, he said, if you're so clever, he said, I'll prove it to you. And it all went quiet. And he said, okay, he said, who's brave enough, he said, to come with me? He said, we'll go out for a ride this evening. And Alan and two other boys, they thought, oh, yeah, okay, we'll go along with this. And that evening, Jason, three other boys, and an older boy who was able to drive, went off in this small car. So there were 5 boys in this small car. And Jason said to them, okay, we're going to drive out through the middle of this cornfield. And when they got halfway, so they were literally miles from absolutely everything, Jason said, okay, you can stop now. And they stopped the car, and it went quiet. Jason sat and closed his eyes. And then after 5 minutes, nothing happening, the boys started having a go at Jason again, and oh yeah, weirdos full of it and all this sort of thing. And then one of the boys said, hey, what's that? And they looked up and there was a star But this star was bigger than any of the others, and the thing about it was that it seemed to be coming lower. And then it started getting bigger. The more it approached, the bigger it got. And when Jason was relating this to me later, he suddenly burst out laughing, and I said, "What's so funny?" And he said, "Oh, Mum," he said, you should have been there. He said, because he said suddenly, he said this thing was so bright and was lighting up the whole area. He said, and then he said 4 doors opened almost at the same time. He said 4 boys went in 4 different directions. He said, and then they realized at the same moment that there's nowhere to go in a cornfield. He said, and then they all piled back in. He said, I was just cracking up. He said, I just sat there, I couldn't stop laughing. He said, and then of course he said it was like, they're all shouting to this other boy, drive, He said, I don't even know what happened after that. Because he said, with all the dust they were kicking up, he said, you couldn't see a thing. But I mean, okay, after that, he never, ever had another problem at school. He earned a lot of respect. Unfortunately, he never never got any more friends, but he had respect. Now, I'd like to touch on something which is very personal to me, if I may. When I told you about the incidents with the death of our cattle on the farm, I neglected to mention at that time that this was also the time that I had a miscarriage. Now, this is a very personal issue for me, and something that was known only to Paul and me, or so I thought, because our doctor had said that it would be dangerous for me and the baby to continue. The doctor said, remember what happened when Jason was born. And he said, you really need to think about this carefully. You need to make a decision. Now, as I said, this was something that was between me and my husband. But you can only imagine how I felt when I learned from the psychiatrist that Jason had spoken to her at length about his baby brother who wasn't born here. Now, I had flashbacks of what happened that night when I lost the baby. I remember waking in bed and seeing small grey beings around the bed. Then, gradually over time, I started getting flashbacks of a bigger picture. I became aware of a procedure in which I couldn't move. I was somewhere else, I couldn't move. Gradually, over time, I became convinced that they had taken my child. I was, until then, quite complacent, I suppose, about the alien issue. My main concern was that my son was okay, that Jason was fine. But I'd always believed that they were essentially good and trying to help us. I changed my opinion radically after this event, and I harboured nothing but hatred for them. I considered that they had no right to do that, no right whatsoever, and I couldn't get over this. But as is usual with me, if I can't handle something, I try and put it to the back of my mind, and I try or at least I hope it stays there. That way I don't have to think about it, I don't have to explore it. But this wouldn't. Now, a few times over the years, Jason tried to talk to me about the baby, and once we were sitting on our own, and he said to me, "So what would you have called him then?" And I said to him, "No, I don't want to talk about this." He said, "Yeah, but what would you have called him?" And I said, "Nathan." We wanted to call him Nathan. And he looked thoughtful for a moment, and he said, "No, it doesn't sound nothing like it." And I said to him, "Okay, enough, end of conversation." Now, sometime again after that, Jason came into my room one night and he said to me, "Do you want to see Nathan, Mum?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Why?" He said, "He does love you, And I said, "No, just go out, Jason. This is not up for discussion." And I remember that we had a blazing row about it, and in the end I just screamed at Jason, "Look, if they wanted me to meet him, then all they've got to do is arrange to have me taken again." He said, they've done it before, so what's different? And Jason said, "No." He said, "This has to happen out of love." I was upset by this, but still I denied this. My anger, my hatred would not allow me to even think about this situation. I knew it was a real situation. I knew what had happened, but I could not handle it. I thought that by not speaking about it, by not discussing it, then I could forget it, but I couldn't. Now, a few days after that, we were all at my mum's for the evening. Our family was up with my mum. Then my brother David turned up with his family. And it got very late in the evening, and it was raining quite heavily. And then for some reason, David got up and he said, "I've got to go for a walk." And we said, "Well, it's late, it's raining." He said, "I've got to go for a walk." And he went out into the night, and we were getting worried. And then he did return, and he said, "You know," he said, "I was walking through the park," he said, "and suddenly," he said, this man was in front of me." He said, "A very tall man." He said, "And I suddenly stopped and I thought, oh no, I'm going to be mugged or something." He said, and then he said, out from behind this man, he said, stepped this small boy. And he said, and then he said instantly, he said, in my head, he said, "I don't know how," he said, "but he said, I was told that I'm related to this child." He said, "And I was told that this child will be known to me as Nathan." I was devastated. And when he was telling me this, I mean, as I said, bear in mind that even my mother didn't know about any of this. But I was so jealous. I can't tell you how jealous I was. And, I thought, well, why on earth would he be introduced to my son when I haven't? And then it dawned on me that I hadn't wanted to meet him. Now, I decided then that I would get help to understand my fears and anger that I felt about Nathan being taken from me. But I could find no one in England with the professional skills, or more importantly, the understanding to help me through this issue. I needed to understand what went on. Now, it wasn't until about a year later that we had the good fortune to visit Australia, and I stayed with a good friend of ours, Mary Rodwell, who, again, a lot of you will know. And she was able, at last, to help me understand this situation and to move on. Now, my regression wasn't taped. I didn't want it to be taped. But Mary made a tape afterwards because the whole thing, she was so moved by the whole thing. And I brought the tape with me. I was going to put it up here. But Jason came and said to me yesterday, Mum, you've got to tell this about Nathan. He said, it's for you to say. And I said, no, I'm not strong enough. And he said, oh, yes, you are. So I hope he's right. So here goes. Now, in Australia, we chose a time for the regression when the house was empty. Paul and the boys had gone out shopping. And Mary took me back to that night when it happened, when I lost a baby. I saw what happened. My flashbacks were correct, but I was seeing a fuller picture. I saw everything happen. I saw the baby being taken. I saw it being put in a receptacle. And even though Mary kept stressing, you're only witnessing this, you're not involved, you can't be hurt, I could feel the pain. And I could see myself lying on this slab, and the beings had gone, and I was just left there on my own after all of this. And I was in such immense pain, and I could feel the tears running down my face, although I couldn't move. And I was convinced I was going to die, and I remember thinking, no, not here, not now. I want to be with my family. I don't want to die here. And that's when I saw the face of a tall human being. And he put his hand on my forehead, and instantly, there was just no pain. And I just felt so calm and peaceful, and it was just such a wonderful feeling. And he said to me in my head, it's for the best. Now, I was quite devastated by this, but this was nothing new. I knew what had happened, so this didn't do anything for me. And Mary said to me, okay, we're going to go back a few days before this happened, and I want you to describe to me, what you're seeing, what's happening. And I saw myself in a room. It was a small room. I was dressed in my night clothes, and I was standing there with this same man, who I recognized as Daniel's soldier man, as Junus. I recognized him from Daniel's descriptions. And he was saying to me, he was pleading with me to let them take the baby. And I heard myself saying to him, no, no way. You know, this is nothing to do with you. This is my decision, mine and Paul's. It's not yours. And he kept saying to me, please, let us help. They said, you know, you are important to us. We can't lose you. And I said, no, you know, this is our decision. And he said, no. He said, you have too gentle a soul to make the right decision. And gradually I saw myself listening to him. And I was starting to cry. And then finally I heard myself agree. I gave my permission. I said, yes, you can take him. And I said to him, I said, there's two things. I said, you've got to promise to love him. And you've got to promise to tell him that I gave him up because I love him and I had no choice. And he agreed. And Mary brought me back to, we were sitting in the room where we'd started, and I was crying, she was crying. It was extremely emotional, as you can imagine. And then she said to me, are you ready to see your son? And I said, yes. And as I turned, the energy in the room just changed. It was just so wonderful, so amazing. And I saw the soldier man, and he was holding the hand of a small boy of about 10 or 11, which would have been about the right age. And instantly I knew it was Nathan, because in his face I could see both Daniel and Jason, and I knew that he was ours. And he was holding a red rose. And he said to me that he often sees Dad giving me red roses because he knows how much I love them. And we were talking. I don't know what we were talking about, but we seemed to be talking for ages. But I remember saying to him, you know, you really should get a haircut, because I don't want people calling you a girl, you know, because he had this like long wavy hair. And I said, I don't want people thinking that you're a girl. And he laughed. And as he laughed, I noticed that he had a tooth missing right at the front. So, yeah, he was, what can I say, he was totally human. I don't know how long this lasted, but when he went, I didn't feel sad. I just felt like the weight of the world had been lifted. You know, I'd had all this anger, all this hatred for all these years, but now I understood that I gave them permission to do what they did. They didn't do what they wanted to do. They didn't just go ahead. And I've seen Nathan many times since then, and it's always wonderful. But to come back to this time in Australia, when Mary and I felt better, we left the room, and as we went out into the living room, the boys had just come back from a shopping trip, and as Jason walked past me, he turned and he said, so why do you think Nathan needs a haircut, Mum? He said, I think it suits him. Okay. Now, as I said, this is a very brief overview of our situation. It's like the tip of the iceberg. I mean, Jason is now totally happy with their intrusion into his life, and he can't now imagine his life without them, his other family. He has certain abilities. He's a great healer, though most of his work is done on another level. But he does work equally well in the physical, as we witnessed many times. In fact, a while ago, a friend of ours had a trapped nerve in his shoulder, which had stopped him working. He wasn't even able to do his job. And he spent so much money on various physiotherapists and all these professionals, and nobody could do anything for him. And he was in so much pain. And he asked if Jason could help. And Jason said, yeah, tell him to come over. And Jason was sitting in the living room with him. We were all sitting in the living room, and you know, this friend of ours was you know, talking to Jason about football, about girls, about music, all sorts of things. And then when there was a lull in the conversation, you know, the friend said to Jason, you know why I'm here, don't you? And Jason, without even looking up, said, yeah. And he said, can you help me? And again, without even looking up, Jason said, done. And the guy got up and he went, and he was totally shocked that he had no pain. And then Jason looked at him and he said, it's not going to last though. He said, you know, you've got to work on it yourself. He said, but he said, I'll show you how to do it. And he went off with the friend and apparently showed him what he should do. But this event actually changed his life, this guy. He actually then sold his house, and the last we heard, he was touring in a motorhome around Europe, sort of connecting with like-minded people, which is wonderful. Now, Daniel, Jason's older brother, has nicknamed Jason. He's given him a nickname, the nickname of Fester, which is after Uncle Fester of the Addams family, who apparently had the ability to make light bulbs glow when he put them in his mouth. Now, as Jason's effect on electrical equipment is very well known, Daniel was ever hopeful to get a chance of shoving a light bulb in his mouth to see if he gets the same effect. But you can just imagine Jason's answer. In fact, when Jason was at school, once he started sort of accepting his experiences, we got a letter from the school because he was in a lot of trouble. Apparently, he was charging other kids money to give them a mild electrical shock. And the principal said, this is not on, we can't have this. Now, a well-known researcher actually stayed at our house for a few days and interviewed Jason. And Jason was quite forthcoming, but when she asked if she could take a photograph of him, he said no. And not to be put off, she said, well, I'm going to take one anyway. And she was sitting across the table from him, but he didn't shield his face or anything. And she set up a camera, which is a state-of-the-art affair, and camera wouldn't work. So she changed the batteries. Still wouldn't work. She changed the bulbs. Still nothing. She looked at him and she said, you're doing this, aren't you? And he just grinned. And she said to him, please, just one. And he said, okay, but only one. So she set her camera up again, and half expecting that it wouldn't work, she clicked, and the camera functioned perfectly. And she sort of mumbled something about, oh, no, I wasn't ready for that, I'll take another one. But again, the camera refused to work. And he smiled at her and he said, only one. Now, when travelling to Australia, as I said, we went over to see Mary Rodwell. We were let down on our accommodation just a few weeks before we were to leave. And Mary managed to fix us up with an acquaintance of hers who was a very spiritual lady. But then, a few days before we left for Australia, I got an email from this lady to tell me that she'd met Jason the previous night. She explained to me that she'd been in her sitting room reading and he appeared. She held a conversation with him, and she told me things in the email that only Jason would have known. I asked Jason about this, and he said that he shouldn't have gone, but he was excited and wanted to see where we would be staying, and if the lady, who was very spiritually aware anyway, would be able to cope with him. And he said his verdict was, yeah, she's pretty cool. Now, on the plane, he drew a plan of the house and the furniture. I kept this to check, when we got there, and he was spot on. Now, a while ago, we were watching TV, and there was it was a Discovery Channel, and it was a thing about people that were having implants removed. And I said to Jason, have you ever thought of having yours removed? And he said, God, no. And I said, why? And he said, people think that they're tracking devices. He said, they're not. He said that they're put in our bodies. He said to note the changes. He said they're actually called bioreaders. He said they're put there to note the changes. He said they do have good side effects. He said, which is that if someone is, developing an illness, excuse me, he said these things will actually help to, maybe not get rid of it. He said, but to keep it at bay. He said, and he looked at me and he said, well, I said, no way does somebody get mine. Now, our journey continues. I feel it will for a long time to come. We've had to cope with a lot of strange experiences, especially as Jason started coming to terms with who he really is. But the important thing is that we're still all here, and our family is as strong as ever. Jason has met with and has knowledge of many different entities which are all here now. These experiences are gathering momentum, not just with us, but with thousands of people all over the world. And there is a need now for people to be aware that we don't, and we never have, stood alone in the universe. Now, just as a final thing, I'll just show you a few of the pictures which have been taken around our property. This was just a light that we saw, which displayed this rather weird thing. Oh, that one hasn't come out clearly at all. But on the photograph, you can actually see some sort of being in the corner. Okay, again, that's not come up too well. But I don't know if you can see, sort of right down the bottom there, by the little fountain, there's a figure. I don't know if it's come up well at all, but it's a very dark figure. Okay. That was like a disc which suddenly sort of flew past our property. I assure you it's not the moon. And that's the last one I have. Again, I put this one in. I don't know what it is. You know, it's up to you what you make of it. But what I was actually photographing was I was looking at the sunset through the window when I saw these little tiny red fairy lights. And they were also like dancing around by the tree. And I thought, wow, that's unusual. And I took a photograph of these lights. And when it was developed, this is what I got back. Now, yeah, as I say, that picture was taken with a disposable camera, you know, one of the ones where you just click and then you give them the whole camera to develop. So, as I say, what you want to make of it is up to you. This is a picture of Jason on his wedding day. This is his wife, Jacqueline, who's also an experiencer. Again, I put that one in just to show you that we are very normal people. And I suppose that's it from me. And what I'd like to do now is to introduce to you my son, who I'm very proud of, and I'd like you to meet Jason. Thank you. Let's get up. Okay.
You have to bear with me. This is my first talk that I've ever given, so I'm not really too used to talking. I usually leave it up to either my mum or my wife. They make up for any man. What I'm basically here to do is just to run through a few things that have gone on in my life. A few of my experiences, a few things that I've learnt, and hopefully, you know, it might help a few people out there. Maybe you might have had the same sort of experiences. I'd like to start off by talking about my first memory that I can remember. It may sound strange, but I do remember being, as a young child, as being a baby. I remember laying in my cot, or as you call it over here, a crib, and seeing a pair of hands coming down to pick me up. I was used to this because it was usually mum or dad, you know, picking me up, giving me a cuddles and that. But even at this young age, I knew that it wasn't even my mum or my dad. That was my first memory. When I got a bit older, I was starting to have my experiences more in depth. So I was actually listening, you know, to what was going on around me and seeing what was going on around me. I started to learn a bit more about what was actually happening to me rather than just remembering the first couple of minutes and then blanking out the rest. I guess I was just, you know, a bit curious. When I was about 12 years old, I was really, you know, understanding all of my experience. What's it called? I was coming to grips with what was actually happening to me rather than just being afraid of what was happening to me. As you can imagine, being taken away by these little grey dudes that, you know, you don't know what's going on, and, you know, you're reading stories about all these demons and, you know, vampires or whatever, and you're starting to think, oh dear, what's happening? I'm coming back, I'm in pain, I've got scars, And I mean, as you can imagine, it was absolutely terrifying. Even after 12 years of this happening, say 4 or 5 times a week, I was still absolutely petrified. The real turning point for me was when I was 12 years old and my mum and dad actually sat down and talked to me about this without laughing or smirking or, saying, oh, well, never mind, let's go and have some ice cream sort of thing. They actually sat down and they listened, and that meant a lot to me because they started to actually believe me, which I'd never had before. I mean, I'd never had anyone even just sit down and listen to me talk for more than a couple of minutes without laughing. Pretty much like I have now. So I was starting to overcome my fear through having the support of my family around me. I then decided, instead of being afraid, I was going to actually start to properly listen and try and learn a bit more about what was going on to me. I realized there was nothing that I could do to stop this by now. So I figured, well, you might as well accept it and, see if you can get some good out of all this, which I did. Which was when they started to teach me seriously. They started to show me things that I was capable of doing. At this point, I thought that I was learning this new stuff. I felt really special that, they'd chosen me, and, at this point I thought, well, this is turning into a positive experience. I'm glad that this is happening to me. It was at this point that they were showing me what things I could do and what abilities I had, which they still do now. But as I said, I thought that they were teaching me. I now know that they wasn't teaching me, they were actually helping me to remember, which may sound a bit silly, but it's the way it is. One of the best things that they helped me to remember and focus in on was to be able to help people, both emotionally and physically, especially with the healing side of things. I know there's a lot of healers out in the world. I mean, you've got like normal doctors, and you've got witch doctors, and Reiki healers, and many, many more. But what I was starting to learn was something unlike any of this. It was something which I felt was quite unique, which I have tried sharing with a couple of people before, and for some reason they don't seem to be able to grasp. They just say, you show off just because you can do it. When I was being woken up to what was actually happening to me and realizing all of these abilities, I started to question, well, instead of them teaching me, why am I actually remembering this? Why am I picking this up so quickly? I was thinking, oh, I'm just a normal, everyday kid that's got this really brilliant opportunity to learn all this stuff. When they finally got it through to me that I'm not just a normal kid, I'm not just a normal, everyday Joe Bloggs. The reason I was picking it up was because I was remembering it because I chose to come here. I was what you guys would probably call a walk-in. It's probably the best way I could describe it. As my mum said earlier, when this body was born, when I was born, the heart actually stopped beating. My mum was due to give birth to a stillborn baby. At that point, when the energy left this body, I chose to come into this as a conscious decision. But the only problem was, when I did come into this, I was slightly subject to normal human thinkings, normal human ways, upbringings, learn how to play football rather than how to levitate, usual sort of things. It eventually took quite a while to actually get to grips with with that. You know, you don't sort of turn around one day and say, that's all right, E.T. phone home's got nothing on me, I'm cool. But eventually you do come to grips with it, and at that point the doors open and you start to learn exactly what is going on. I don't look at any type of ET. I don't look at the greys, the reptilians. I don't look at any species in the universe as being different to me or anyone else. I look at every single being throughout the universe as being one of the same. My reason for saying that isn't for, you know, the way they look or even the way they think, but just for the fact that we all came from the same place. We all, you know, no matter what colour, what scales, skin or anything, we all started off from the same place, and we all went on separate journeys. Some of us are, you know, count quicker, some of us can levitate, some of us can, you know, eat a cheeseburger in 30 seconds, you know. But all in all, we're pretty much one of the same. So when I go on to speak about the greys and the hybrids and stuff, I may refer to them as, you know, my friends or something like that, because that's how I choose to see it. That's my belief. Talking about the hybrids, there was something that I would like to share with you all about hybrids. I've been told that it's quite well known that hybrids are created by these little grey dudes, and you know, they're made up of man and alien, if you like, and stolen from women's wombs and all of this other stuff. I don't believe that to be true for 1 second. My belief is that they're not actually cloning or, you know, messing around with human DNA and their DNA, but the military or government or, you know, whatever sort of way you want to put it into are. They have been finding this alien technology for years and years and trying to recreate it, like the stealth fighter, or as they like to call it, the wobbling goblin. They could create the outer shell, and you know, they could get it all so it looked exactly right, but they couldn't figure out how to power these things. You know, they couldn't find any on or off switch, basically. For many years, they tried everything they could to try and back engineer all of this stuff. And then they finally realized that, well, they're just not cut out to do this and not cut out to be able to master this sort of technology yet. So they realized that they could not hold and control or try and influence one of the Greys or any of the ETs. So they chose to see if they could mix some human DNA with some ET DNA, believing that they would have the ET's, you know, knowledge and power and everything, but have the human side so that they could teach them and control them. You know, basically stick them in a room and poke them with sharp sticks, if you like. When people have said that they've seen these hybrids up on ships, I quite believe them. I've seen quite a few up on ships myself, but the way I believe it, the way I see it, is that no matter, even if these hybrids are only half ET and half human, I don't believe that the Greys see it fair that they should be stuck in a room and poked with sticks. They should be, you know, they should have a better choice in life than that. They're still part of their race. They're still part of their, you know, their existence. So I see that they choose to go and help these beings and try to put them onto the right track. Same with babies that are taken from wombs. They try and sort of introduce them back to the mother. Obviously, they can't just sort of take them back and say, look, you know, here's your kid, have fun. But they can take them back and say, look, we're trying to take care of them. We want to teach them. We want to help them. You know, they're perfectly safe, and we just wanted you to know that. But to be honest, I could stand up here and rabbit for hours now that I've started on that subject. To talk a little bit more about me being a walk-in, some people might see it as possession or, you know, out of The Exorcist or something like that. I assure you my head does not spin round. When I entered, the person that was here first, he had gone. He wasn't in that body anymore. That body was dead for all, you know, purposes. It's on the medical records and everything. Walk-ins can occur when the body is dead, but walk-ins can also occur when there's someone there, when there's, you know, when you're walking around sort of thing. This is very frowned upon in, well, I suppose there's not really a set of rules, but if you like, it's a set of rules that aren't written, just sort of guidelines that you obey by. This doesn't happen often, but it is possible. But I do assure you, I'm one of the good guys. My mum briefly talked about my younger brother Nathan, who is here with me today. He's a bit shyer than me. It was very hard for my mum to accept Nathan, whereas it was quite easy for me. I had always wanted some sort of link between the sort of everyday human life, sort of paying your bills and going to work, and then you've got the other sort of side of your life where you're going up in spaceships and learning how to astrally project and heal people. There was always something missing in the middle. And to me, my brother Nathan really filled that void, because he was part of me, part of, you know, normal human life, but he was up there with them, and he was a big sort of bridge to me. It helped me a lot. I'm very rarely parted from my brother Nathan, usually in spirit. He's a good laugh. I like him. Like I said, it was very hard for my mum because she didn't have the nightly schooling, if you like. She didn't have the completely two separate lives. She had like 90% normal and the 10% that she didn't talk about. One thing I would like to quickly move on to is past lives. As many of you know, you've never only lived once, you know. Don't believe the James Bond films. You've each had many, many lives, you know, throughout your existence. The same with every other energy form in existence. But the difference between me and a lot of other different life forms is I have the ability to remember my previous lives, be it, you know, needing a little bit of a shove in the right direction when I was younger. What you've got to try and understand is I can remember every life since as far back as I can remember, which is quite a long time. But each one of you has the same ability to do so. Each one of you have learnt so much in all of your lives that you have all of the information and all of the answers just waiting there. You don't need to go to someone and be regressed to see this. To be honest, 9 times out of 10 when people actually do that, they're not actually seeing their own life. That's why you're getting like, you know, 60 King Lears and stuff like this. Okay, they may be seeing what King Lear or whoever was seeing back at that time, back at that point in time, but that's not necessarily their memories, it's not necessarily their life. They're just seeing into the energy, the big sort of void that they feel inside themselves. But if you just accept a few things into your present life, then you will start to actually feel this void being filled. You'll start to actually see that you don't need to go and learn a new language because you already know it. You know, you don't need to learn, you know, spend years and years to learn how to meditate because it's something that everybody has. You know, there is nothing in this world that anybody can do that someone else can't, as long as you believe in yourself enough to do it. I think that was really the biggest point I wanted to get across here. Just having a quick look at my little notes. Can't even read my own handwriting. Oh well. Right, there's one rule that I choose to live my life by, and that one rule is the fact that although I do a lot of healing and I do a lot of work to help people and beings, I don't ever interfere. I won't interfere. I won't sort of push them in. I won't sort of push them into the door. The way I live my life is I'm here to see if I can help people if they need my help and if they want my help. I'm here to try and teach people if they want to learn. If they want to go on their own separate path, then that is up to them, each to their own, whatever you believe in, basically. But the one rule is that I'm not allowed to interfere. I'm not allowed to take charge and decide, fate for somebody else, which I believe that if everybody lived by that, it would be a much better place to live, to be honest. I'm only going to give a short talk today because, like I said, I'm not too used to talking, I'm afraid. After I've finished rabbiting for a bit, we're going to move on to some questions, which people tell me I'm a bit better at, so hopefully you won't be quite so bored. There is a lot more that I have to say. A lot of it my mum has spent a long time writing down in the second book and the first book. But if anyone had anything that they would personally like to come and talk to me about, or actually get into in-depth conversations, I'm usually better at those than I am at standing up and talking. So the little thing just flashed up saying 20 minutes remaining, so I think that we should probably move on and see if we can get a few questions sorted out here and see if we can come to a few answers.
Hi, my name is Joanne, and I really appreciate your sharing. I'm already in the healing field as a massage therapist and Reiki master and a nurse. I'm hearing or knowing that it's important for me to really advance my skills. I mean, almost like hyperspeed is what I'm hearing right now. Okay. How can you advise me as far as where to go, what to do, or to, really enhance my skills fast?
To do it fast or to do it well?
Well, I've already done healing for over 20 years is what I mean. I'm not new.
Believe in yourself more than anything else. All that truth ever is what you believe, and it's all that it ever will be. No matter, even if you believe 2 + 2 is 3, if that's the truth to you, that's all the truth you'll ever need, and that will help you in every aspect of your life. Try without trying, if that makes any sense. Sort of, how can I put it? Just believe in yourself and believe that you can do it without trying, and you'll get better results than if you spent 100 years trying.
I would also like to have more of the guides or angels or whatever, God, etc. I would want to be able to access that even better, so yeah. How would you advise?
Well, you have a lot of guides because you're into all of your Reiki.
Yes.
Would you like to tell the lady how you came to get all of yours? Because to be honest, when my mum started out, I did try and teach her my way of healing, and like I said, she just didn't quite grasp it. Yeah. Just meant it wasn't right for her. So she went into the whole Reiki thing and started to learn more about it. And and she started off with like 1 or 2 guides, and now she's got her own little tribe. So
No, it's like Jason said, a lot of it is belief in yourself. As he pointed out in his talk, you have to be all that you can be. I mean, we were once, many years ago. We had it all. We had everything. Instead of using a little bit of our brain, we were able to use all of our brain. And I believe that, as he said, just by believing that you can do this. I mean, it's belief that is the key. And by asking, just sit quietly and just ask, and it's just amazing what sort of results that you can get. There is, I suppose it's an old cliche, which says that sometimes you have to believe before you can see, rather than see to believe. And I think that's very apt. You just have to believe in yourself and in your abilities, and you can do amazing things, which I know that you're capable of. So, okay. Does that help?
Yes. Thank
you.
Both of you very much for your bravery, and this is such a safe place to say anything else.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for your great presentations. It's obvious that you feel that it's okay for people to be abducted and done with whatever the aliens want to do with people. But you haven't expressed why they're doing what they're doing, why they're here, what the purposes are for the abductions, and why it's okay for them to do what they're doing.
okay. To start off with, I don't agree that it's okay for them to do what they want to. When I say that in a more broader sense, as in there's not just one race out there that are, coming down here and just picking on us. There's quite a few different races, and there's quite a few that come to visit this planet, which is why you do get the different abductees that have seen the different races. You can't sort of class them all under the same sort of, thing. I believe that with the Greys, they are coming down here to help us and to benefit us. They're coming down here to try and show us part of what we are capable of and what we need to be capable of doing for the future. There are some cases where I believe it's not necessary. You have several different types of reptilians that visit and live on this planet, some of which are nice, some of which are not. The way I perceive it is it's sort of yin and yang. Half of them are here to help, half of them, I guess, probably don't really care about helping us too much. But I just try and focus on the positive side, and that usually helps me to get through it.
Thank you.
I agree with that last statement perfectly. It seemed to me that you were alluding to the fact that the hybriding program with the Greys is actually a military operation. So you're saying that the Greys are not actually doing this or creating a hybrid race, that it's actually the government that's doing that?
To put it in a different way, if you were perfect, or say, well, no one's perfect, but if you were like 95% perfect, and you found this species that was, say, I don't know, 40% perfect, would you want to mix them?
That's a very good point.
That's why you don't mix humans with monkeys, it's a similar sort of thing. It's just two different sort of grades. But like I said, they do have the compassion to see that they are not going to leave any creature which is, once again, part of their race, their civilization. They're not going to leave them down here to be abused in the way that they are.
So the military is making these hybrids to be able to fly these ships that they're building?
Yes, to be able to learn more about them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This was wonderful. I hope to take the video home with me so I can show my friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I recently saw the movie Indigo, and James Twyman talks about some of these especially gifted children being in contact with other children that are like them around the world. And I'm wondering if that's true for you, but I really wonder if you can put into words what your mission is, if you have a mission for this life.
That is, I can tell you part of it, but I don't believe that anyone is ready to hear the full story, and I don't believe that it's prudent for anyone else to hear. I'm here to try and help people to wake up. I'm also here to try and help people like myself to understand why they are here and what they are here to do. On the subject of meeting with other beings like myself, yes, I do have that ability, because as I said before, we are all connected into one. Although be it that, we have different feelings and, we lead different lives, at some level we are still connected. So, yes, we do still have a link, and after I help someone, they help someone else, and hopefully it will carry on going on like that until nobody needs any help anymore.
And do you identify as being a Grey?
Sorry?
Are you a Grey?
No, I'm not a Grey. I'm kind of pink.
You're very nice pink, too.
Thank you
And
very much.
I want to say that you are just a fine public speaker.
Thank
Did
you.
very, very well.
Brilliant.
Both of you.
Thank you.
Definitely. I really have two questions. One is related to what she just asked. Are you aware of what sort of being you were before you walked in here?
Every time.
Every type?
Every time.
Does that mean every type in different incarnations?
Well, yeah, you're never the same thing twice. I mean, you can be a person twice, but I mean, you won't be the same one twice. So yeah, every single time is different in one way or another.
Okay, and were they all what we would call extraterrestrial? Is this your first human lifetime?
No, it's not.
It's not your first human one. So do we sort of go back and forth in different incarnations?
It depends on how well you do before. If you choose to live your life to build something for yourself from the inside out, then more choices are open to you when you move on. As far as death is concerned, death does not exist. No matter what you take anything down, whether you burn wood or kill someone, you can never actually destroy it. It will just turn into another form of energy, which is the same as when people die. The only difference is sometimes they forget the energy they were before, and they forget the memories, which are also energy from the previous life.
Thank you. Also, can you suggest to us how we could remember previous incarnations without regression?
Yeah, it sounds really stupid, but you have to let yourself. And I know people just think, oh, well, that's easy, I'll just let myself believe it, but it's the hardest thing in the world, because you've got so many years of, social upbringing and people telling you, what to believe and what to do. But for you to actually be able to let go 100%, just to let yourself listen to what's around you, is the hardest thing in the world. But once you've done it, you'll never have to learn a new thing in your life.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
You touched a little bit on the hybrid program that was going on, and I was wondering, you said that they were somewhat, in ufology we talk about reverse engineering with craft and making technology for now. Do you believe that the hybrid program that you said the government, you believe, is conducting, do you think that they're trying to get these energies, these senses that you have, and flip that switch on? Because you said that they couldn't flip the switch on. They can create the body, They
Yeah.
can do the cloning, but they can't flip on the switch. So the telekinetic power, you believe, is the switch that they're trying to turn on that they can't?
Yes. That's why they are trying to create these bodies, but only with half of the ability, half of the DNA, half of the ability, but with the other half human, so they still think that even if they've only got half of the ability and half of the sense, that they can control them, which they can't.
They can control.
They can control the hybrids into teaching them and into controlling the technology that they're trying to build.
Okay, and what do you feel or think or believe through your experiences is the motive for this? What is the reason?
If the kid down the road's got a new toy, you want one. It's pretty much the same thing. You don't want to be left in the dark. And I mean, if they were to wait, if the government and everyone were to wait until all of this stuff was public and just normal and everybody knows how to do it, why are you going to need a government? You're not.
So it's about control.
Always is.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've heard a lot of talk about predictions of doom and gloom and coming destruction and so forth and so on. Do you have something positive that you can share about what you feel is ahead for the human race?
Each different person decides their own fate. I mean, there is nothing set in stone that you can turn around and say, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to die on the ride home, It's all set up so that what you choose to make into your own future, into your own destiny, is what will happen to you.
I meant more collectively for the whole human race.
More collectively, well, it's as they say, one human being is quite a smart and understanding animal, but when you get a group of them together, you might as well just shoot them all. The brains just stop working for some weird reason.
Well, besides executing all of us.
Like I said, it just applies to what I said before. You're each in control of your own destiny, and I'd hope that someday people would start to maybe latch on to one thing that I do with the whole I teach someone else and help someone else, and then there's 2 of you to go and help 2 more people, and then there's 4 of you to go and help 4 more people. Now, if that's to happen, then I don't see any problems. But at the moment, people are too busy squabbling over, what's a better healing method, or, how many scales a reptilian's got, or whatever, to actually stop and think, well, it doesn't matter. As long as you're happy with believing that, and we can move on from this and evolve to the next level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What would you like to say about human origins?
Human origins? Not a lot. Well, it's pretty obvious by now that, humans did not evolve on this planet naturally. Right. The reason that you'll never find the missing link is because there isn't one. There's 2 separate different things. Right. Even the Bible talks about Adam and Eve, and Eve was made from Adam's rib. There's too much in there just to be, they've evolved over a few million years. Someone or something came down here and decided to give a new species a try,
Yeah.
Just the same as what our scientists do in the labs today.
You happened to mention indigo children, and I was wondering if the children, so many being diagnosed with ADHD now, and I was wondering if these are indigo children, and if they are, should they stay on medication, or is there another treatment?
As far as indigo children go, the biggest problem I foresee is the fact that people don't understand them and they don't give them the chance to be understood. They're here to help they're not here to be a hindrance. As far as putting them on drugs and stuff is concerned, what are you going to learn from someone that can't even speak properly? You know.
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
What are you going to learn from somebody who can't even speak properly? You know, from somebody who's getting, you know, all these drugs that are altering the way they think, the way they talk.
Right.
You need people to actually be there so that they can be themselves rather than what you want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We go home now.
I think so. Just say thank you.
I'd like to say thank you for everybody turning up and not falling asleep on me. Hopefully you've learned a couple of things, and I've certainly learned a couple of things, like these lights are very hot. Thanks again, and thanks for the people putting all of this together so that we can all try and learn something new. Thank you.
Thank you.